bro. I think what you guys are doing is awesome. So I'd like to hear from somebody why you decided to be a part of this. What moved you to join a club like this? Preferably someone not chewing their pizza. Everybody takes a bite. You guys could be doing a lot of things with your time right now. Why this? It says a lot. Yeah.
You're fine. You're good. You're fine.
It'd be good to hear speakers like you help influence us about life.
Okay, so we get to talk about life issues and to think about them maybe a little bit more and be influenced in a positive way?
To make a statement that we stand for life.
Yeah, to who? To make a statement to who?
To our peers.
Yeah, to the rest of the kids in the school? Yeah, okay. Great. Why else? Why are you a part of this? Helps me to know. Free pizza? It's kind of nice. Yeah. You get that every time?
So far.
Why else? Yeah.
It's like a safe environment to talk about issues.
Yeah, that can be huge, right? Safe environment to talk about issues. That's actually the reason why we do Alpha. Alpha's in the parish. We were just talking about it as a staff. We do it out in a bar. We do it at the Box Bar. And it's a really safe environment for people to talk about things that matter that, unfortunately, in the culture in which we're living, usually the moment you get into whatever the issue is, voices just get really loud and you start yelling at each other and there's no real serious discussion, right? There was an incident, I don't know if it happened yesterday, the day before, it happened recently at a college campus in Texas. So it was a pro-life group. They were sponsoring some things. They had pictures on the campus of what abortion is, right? So it's one thing to talk about the Holocaust, right? It's another thing to go to Auschwitz. So I've been in Auschwitz. Anybody ever been to Auschwitz? John and I were there together. I've been there 3 times now. I don't want to go to Auschwitz ever again. It's one thing to hear about what happened. It's another thing to be there, right? In a similar kind of way, I don't want to make the connection between the two other than to say, in a similar way, it's one thing to talk about abortion. It's another thing to see abortions. And there's a time and a place for letting people see that. There's a time and a place not for letting people see that. But so college campus, which is supposed to be a place where we're actually doing some serious thinking and talking about issues and trying to engage the intellect and expand the mind, should be a place where we actually talk about issues. So a group had organized a talk. They just had pictures out there. Let's make sure we know what we're talking about. And somebody just went ballistic and tore up all the pictures, attacked some people, and somehow this is supposed to be tolerance. Like, we're just trying to have a calm, rational discussion about issues which are almost unmentionable now, should you dare to voice an opinion which is contrary to, public opinion. So to have a safe environment, that's a long way of saying to have a safe environment to talk about these things is really good. And especially a safe environment just to ask questions and to go, I don't understand. Like, why is this such a big issue? Anybody else? Reasons why you're here? Yeah.
Because the pro-life movement is much smaller than the pro-choice movement, and I think we should do everything that we can to make our voices heard.
Okay. It might not be. Actually, I think the encouraging news about the pro-life movement is especially with younger people, mainly because of technology and science and ultrasounds and whatnot. And we're going to get into this in a second. You're the encouraging news that more and more young people are actually pro-life. Because the question as to what is this is no longer a question. And so, it's not unusual for you, especially, who's got a really young brother and sister that you remember when they were born? Who's ever seen an ultrasound on your refrigerator of like one of your brothers or sisters? So it's not unusual for some of us to come home and you're like, Mom's got an ultrasound and that's my brother. Or that's my sister. It's it's not like you look at it and go, wow, should we build a crib or should we get a pen for a giraffe? Like, I wonder what this is going to be. Maybe it's going to be a German Shepherd. So science just shows more now, and we're aware of it. And you, again, I think are real cause for hope for my generation. So let me just try to do a couple things. We have till how long? When do you break?
Till 11:20.
Great.
And if you want to go beyond that, it's your call.
So let's try to do a couple things. I want to talk about a hero that I want to put in front of you that might be someone for you to think about and learn about. I want to talk about how the baton that he might be passing might be being offered to you. And then I want to talk a little bit about how to think about abortion. Okay, can we try to do that? Anybody here ever heard of William Wilberforce? Can you pull him up on a Wikipedia or something? If you can't, don't. But William Wilberforce, so here's the bigger context. So I was sharing a little bit with some of the folks in the parish at one of our rerouting Wednesday sessions. When I was a kid growing up, I had one desire, and my one desire was to play shortstop for the Yankees. So baseball was my love. My grandfather used to own the Lions. My godfather played for the Lions. I grew up with sports. It was everything that I thought was important. And so all of my heroes, if you will, were athletes, because that was the stuff that I loved. And that shaped me as a young boy and as a young man when I went to college as well. At a certain point in my life, the people who became my heroes changed significantly. And when they changed, my life changed. So for me, when I was growing up, I went to a Catholic grade school just like you guys, but I didn't know anything about any saints. You guys know more about the saints than I ever did growing up. Mainly, I think, because my dad was Catholic, my mom was Protestant, so we just didn't talk about saints much. The name of the school I went to was Holy Name, so that's not a saint. So like you didn't learn about your patron saint, we know Our Lady here. And we've gotten to know saints throughout these last couple of years. I didn't know anything about any saints until I actually went to Rome. And when I lived in Rome, then my life changed drastically because I was surrounded by the burial places of the saints. They became very real to me. And when they became real to me, my understanding of what a real hero is changed drastically. So as great as it could be to be, a stud athlete or, a great politician or a significant person in some other field, as great as all that is, real heroes are the people who make significant differences in the wider world, even if it's in a small area. And William Wilberforce is one of them. So this guy goes through a massive conversion to Christianity. And as a result of that, he eliminates the slave trade. So slavery is not only something that continues to go on, right? We all know that, right? Not just human trafficking. But slavery has always existed. It exists in every culture. It's only a Christian worldview that changes somebody's mind to understand that's contrary to the dignity of the human person. Because that person is made in the image and likeness of God. They're loved by God. They're destined to share in his own life. They're so important that God became a man and died for him or her. Therefore, you can't chain them up and treat them like a thing. You don't need to be a Christian to be able to think that way. But once you are a Christian, once you see reality, and especially the reality of the human person, you're caused to react to violations of human dignity in a really profound way. This guy did that. It took him 20 years of constant talking, arguing, getting involved with government, being involved in everything he could to change a culture. And at the end of the 20 years, the slave trade was abolished in the English government. And the English Empire was the largest empire in the world at the time. He's worth learning about. And the reason why I suggest him to you is because I always think about your generation who will be this country's William Wilberforce. So there was if you were living in England and in the English Empire, or the British Empire at the time of Wilberforce, slavery was just a given. This happens. It's always happened. It's always going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. Just deal with it. This man, together with friends, was so convicted about how wrong this is and how contrary this is to human dignity that he says, I have to do something about him. And God tapped him on the shoulder, and he responded courageously. And because of him, slavery was illegal. He's constantly being told along the way, you're never going to do anything, you're just one man, just give up. He's meeting defeat after defeat after defeat. But he's driven by the fact that I know I'm right, not because I'm smart. I just know I'm right. I know this is the right way to think about human beings. I know human beings aren't things. I know you don't treat human beings like animals. I know that. And because he was convinced of his convictions, and because he had good support with him, he changed the world. My question is, which one of you will be the next William Wilberforce? You want to be great? Then step up, grab the baton, and lead a movement to help, starting just like you're doing right now, to start helping people understand we have a serious problem in our country. And we will never be a great country so long as we think it's okay to kill the most vulnerable of our citizens or the most vulnerable of our brothers and sisters. They're not citizens. We don't give them that status. Do you get that? So the first thing I just want to say to you is maybe a question like this. Who are your heroes? And are you thinking big enough? Because God gave each of you all the gifts and talents that you have and all the charisms that you have. You know the difference between a gift and a talent, like a charism and a talent? We talk a lot about charisms at the parish. You know what the difference is? No? Anybody? So charism is a spiritual gift, like a supernatural gift that God gives you, which is not just something that you happen to enjoy, it impacts people. So some people have the non-charism of music. I sit down at a piano, you'll go, hey, would you mind stop playing? Because that's really bad. Like, oh, okay, sorry. Some people, when they sing, you're like, oh, wow, that's kind of grating, you know? Other people sing, and you're like, whoa, I could listen to that all day. And it's not just that they have a good voice. That's a gift. A charism is their singing does something to my life spiritually. So you all have not only talents, but you have charisms, gifts which the Holy Spirit has given to you, which you still don't know yet. Some of them you know maybe, but some of them you're going to discover over these next few years. And the gifts were given to you not really for your own good, but for the benefit of the body, the church, and the wider culture. So, in a certain sense, everything that we watch, listen to, read, whatever, is trying to really narrowly define what greatness looks like or what a hero looks like, and it's wrong. If you're on TV, it doesn't mean you're a hero. It just means you happen to be on TV. You might be a hero. If you're a great athlete, it doesn't mean you're a hero. You might be, it just means you're a great athlete. Heroes are men and women with extraordinary character who realize, I've been given a platform or a stage, I'm going to use it to change other people's lives for the good. And every one of you has been created to be heroic. Don't think small. Think huge. Dare to have massive dreams. Say to God, what do you want me to do with my life? I'll do anything. And then find people that you can kind of walk with who will support, encourage you and you them. Does that make sense? There's some 7th graders in here too, right? Yeah, so those of you in 8th, as you're preparing to get out of here, start thinking, start talking to the Lord about your dreams, your visions. Ask Him, Lord, what's your vision for my life? I want to understand what you've made me for. And don't let it be too narrowly defined. Okay? So here's part of the challenge in our culture.
Smart board.
Yeah. Here's part of the challenge of this gathering. When you're in 9th grade, and I've said this to Ms. Weisberg, when you're in 9th grade and we start talking about this issue, I'll be really blunt. But I can't be yet, because you're still in junior high. This is a massive problem in teaching serious thinking. So you're getting exposed at your age right now to all sorts of things which demand really careful thought.
Main office.
Never mind. Never mind. So we got all these huge issues that are in front of us, and any moral issue is a matter of careful thinking. It's the answer to a question is never, well, because that's who so-and-so said it was, or because that's what the church teaches, or because anything. It's always got to be, what are the reasons for holding that thought? And then we want to talk about the reasons. And in doing that, we're never attacking a person. Like, we want to be tolerant as all get. We don't want to be tolerant at all. We want to be loving. There's a huge difference between being tolerant and being loving. Loving is always treating somebody with charity, even if it's somebody who holds views that I think are just horrific. My only response to another human being can always only be charity, even if you hate me. But tolerance towards ideas is a really different story. So if I stand up here and I go, you know what, I think molesting children is a good thing. And you would go, Father, I don't think so. And I would go, well, why? Well, I just think that's sick. Well, what are your reasons? And we would be able to put forth reasons, right? I mean, it wouldn't be that hard. So it's an example of things get said about moral issues, and then we want to be able to go, do I think that that's the right thing, or do I think that that's in error? As opposed to, do I believe? So maybe the simple way to say this is, moral thinking and moral teaching is never really a question of believing something, it's a question of thinking something. But here's the problem. You're at an age where you're getting exposed to all these things that are coming your way through media of all sorts of kinds, but we can't talk about them here in the way that we need to talk about them. Why? Because some of you aren't exposed to those things yet. So it's almost like some of you are living in a world where you're almost 19, and others of you are living in a world where you're more like 12. And because I'm too careful to not introduce into your mind ideas that I don't know you have yet, I won't talk about them. But once you get to high school, I'll talk about anything, and I'll talk about it really bluntly. And abortion's one of those issues. And there's a lot to say. We said this last year at one of the masses. I remember when we were all together just saying, here's the challenge of being Catholic. Catholicism is an adult faith. And what I mean by that is it requires careful thinking. But Catholic schools often, present company excluded, Catholic schools often, they're answers to the really significant questions that you're asking, which you should ask. You must ask. It's one of the things I love about Father John working with you. He's encouraging you to ask things. But as you ask these questions, oftentimes the response you get is, well, you just shouldn't ask that. Just believe. That's ridiculous. Don't ever accept that. Always push. Always be passionate about finding truth. Because there are answers. And if there's not, make them, find them for you. But on some of the issues that become most significant, like suffering, like why is there evil, like why do bad things happen, like why did my mom die young, whatever the case might be, for some issues, the responses we get back from people who are supposed to be teaching us are juvenile. And our right response to that is to go, this is just the stupidest thing I've ever heard, I'm out of here. This is like the Easter Bunny. But it's not at all. So God gave you a mind like he gave you an appetite. The purpose of your appetite is to put food into it. The purpose of your mind is to find truth and goodness and beauty. Okay? So abortion's really, I think, this simple. It's an either or. So who's seen an ultrasound? An ultrasound tells you that a woman who's pregnant is carrying a what?
Baby.
What kind of baby?
Human baby.
A human baby, right. So here's the either or. That didn't work. Sorry. Uh-oh, now we're doing it. How do I get rid of that? Oh, I got to hit this, don't I? That guy? Yeah. There you go. Where's my pen?
Here, I'll click it. There you go.
Kill the lights, will you? That's the either or. Either all human beings are persons, or only some are. I think, anyway. Do you guys understand that? Is there another way to think about that ultrasound? I think this is the issue. I'd love to hear another way of thinking about this, but I think this is how we're supposed to think about this issue. Notice, I'm not referencing the Catechism, I'm not referencing the Gospels, I'm not referencing Jesus, I'm not referencing anything from religion. This is not a religious issue at all. It's an issue of thinking. So science simply tells us, that's what we're looking at, right? So science is telling us, genetics tells us, embryology tells us that the entity, the thing inside the mother's womb is a human being. It's got its own DNA. It's a self-developing organism. All it needs are two things: nutrients and an environment. Same thing you and I need, by the way. Like, don't eat, you'll die. Take away the oxygen, you'll die. So a child, at the beginning of its life, a human being at the beginning of its life, needs food and it needs an environment. Give it those two things, and it's got a genetic code that will develop. It's self-developing, just like you are. You with me?
So,
Okay.
Father, there's no way it can be just a glob of tissue.
Yeah, so, and everybody in the pro-abortion movement knows that. So the attack against or in favor of abortion used to say, deny that it's a human being. Just say it's a clump of cells. That's just untenable now. You can't hold that position. It's just stupid. It's medically stupid. It's scientifically stupid. People aren't stupid. The view is, right? So it's nonsense. It's not true based on what we know about the data. Okay? You get that? That's huge. So here's what they attack. Okay, it's a human being. It's not a person. That means not all human beings are persons. That's the culture, that's the country that we live in right now. We live in a country which has a law that says not all human beings are persons. Therefore, not all human beings have rights. Therefore, not all human beings have the most important right, which is the right to be alive, without which it really doesn't matter any of the right you have. If you don't have life, you don't have anything. So, here's the question for you. If this is the case, if only some human beings are persons, who would you give that kind of power to? Who could possibly have the power to decide, okay, we're going to say girls aren't persons. Therefore, you can't vote. There was a time in our country when women weren't allowed to vote. They were considered inferior, weren't granted the status of men, therefore not the dignity of being able to do something as significant as elect our officials. That wasn't that long ago, quite frankly. Thanks be to God, that time's over, right? Someone realized, I think this too is stupid. Men and women are different, but they're both human. They're equal in dignity. They're just different. That's how God intended it. There was a time in which a black man or woman was not considered a person. They were considered 3/5 of a person. Right? We've learned that in the Dred Scott decision and whatnot. So sooner or later, someone kind of woke up and went, I think that too is foolishness. This is a man like me. They're just different color. Right? So thanks to the heroic efforts of, say, the women who were advancing the cause of suffragism and folks like Wilberforce who were advancing the cause against the dignity of slaves, or the lack of dignity of slaves, those things are behind us. But we still got a massive problem because we still think, as a law, that only some human beings are persons. So we have given the authority to certain people to be able to make that decision. That raises that question. How are they going to decide that? And isn't it necessarily arbitrary? Meaning, there's no basis for it. It's just something that I happen to have a preference for. I think blondes are persons. Why? I'm attracted to blondes. Sorry. I think Jews are persons. Catholics, no. I think people who have this particular taste in music are persons. These people who don't, no. I think good athletes are persons. Those who aren't, they're treated with lesser dignity. I think really intelligent people are persons. Those who really struggle with school, no, they don't make the grade. I think really attractive physical people are. Those who aren't, no, sorry. All those things are arbitrary, aren't they? Do you guys see how hopefully at least, your mind is trying to get engaged in this? Right? This has nothing to do with faith. Not these questions. This has to do with thinking. And our culture doesn't think. And unfortunately, our education system doesn't teach you how to think. We teach people how to memorize, how to get good grades, how to get into a good school, and how to get a good career, which we define as making a lot of money. We need people who know how to think, because everything begins in the mind. And if my thinking's off, then my actions will necessarily be off. It all begins here. Mr. C?
I was just going to say, Father, I think that's why it's so critical, ladies and gentlemen, what Father was talking about earlier, about this idea of thinking. Because if everything is naturally arbitrary, right, then one of the pitfalls I can fall into, and this happens a lot with issues like abortion, I think, Father, is rather than actually thinking logically through and reaching the truth, what I do is I decide on where it is I want to be, and then I go out and I try to find some data and some information that makes it look like I have a logical or truthful argument. And I don't know, Father, if you want to comment on that, but I think that's where it's critically important to seek the real truth, rather than what I think a lot of people, like Father mentioned, either don't know how or don't want to think. It's easier just to take a position and then grab a few pieces of information to kind of support what I feel. So it sounds like I put some thought into it, or it sounds logical. Have any of you experienced that before? That's all. I got to thinking about that as you were talking about arbitrary and things.
I think you're right on. I think oftentimes we have in our minds what we want the answer to be, and then we work backwards from that. But the key thing for all of us, for me too, I mean, when I'm wrong, I want to know I'm wrong. Like if I'm wrong on this, I would love to know I'm wrong on this. If there's another way to think about this, I'd love to hear another way to think about this. But I don't think so. But maybe there is. You ponder it, show me. Here's the biggest question. Which culture would you rather live in? You want to live in a culture where all human beings are treated with dignity because they're all accorded the status of being persons, therefore they have rights, and there's no exception. Or do you want to live in a culture where only some human beings are treated with dignity and are given rights? And what happens when you're not in that group anymore? What happens when you're sick and you live in a culture where we don't give rights to those who are sick? There are countries in the world today where those who are seriously ill, their families don't make the decisions about whether or not they're going to get cared for. Doctors do, and the doctors can choose to end the person's life. And they base it on, we don't think this is a valuable life anymore, so we're going to end it. And the mom says, no, this is my daughter. And the doctor says, sorry. This isn't science fiction we're talking about. This is today in advanced first world countries. Please don't be so naive to sit there and go, but we're the United States of America, this is never going to happen to us. We've killed 50 million children in the last set of decades. We're doing this now.
Could you speak, Father, to the difference between power and authority in this issue, and also where the devil factors into this, as far as obfuscation of the truth or deluding people?
So Mr. C has authority, I have authority, Mr. Rainville has authority, your mom and dad have authority. We often misunderstand authority to mean power, And unfortunately, we often misunderstand those two because we have experienced people who have authority to wield it, I would say, as if they had power. So power means something like this. Stand up and we do 50 jumping jacks right now. No, don't. And you would go, why would I do that? Because I said so. And I'm in control here. And you will do what I want you to do, even if you don't want to do it. I don't care. If you were in my role, you could do whatever you want, but you're not. That's power. I'm making it felt, right? When your dad says to you or your mom says to you, when you ask a question, why? And they say, because I'm your mom, I said so. I get that answer on one hand, but it's wielding power. Authority is something like this. Authority is a gift that's given to somebody, a president, a governor, a mayor, a principal, a pastor, a teacher, a mom, a dad, so as to lead the people who are entrusted to them to fulfillment. That's the purpose of authority. So we often hear just something as simple as what I said to you, like, isn't that too bad I'm in charge, you're not? If you were in charge, you could do whatever you wanted, but you're not, right? So that ain't authority. Authority is always on the lookout for how do I care for the people who are entrusted to me. So if I'm a political person and I've been elected to care for a township, a city, a state, a country, and I don't know how to think about some of these issues, what am I going to do? I'm going to wield power. I'm going to be, you guys all got the money, so you're giving me some cash. Okay, so what is it you're interested in? Okay, we'll make sure we take care of your concerns. Oh, sorry, you guys don't have any cash. Oh. Now, if you had a little something in this hand, and you put it in this hand, well, maybe we'd be able to take care of that. And that's how politics works. Give us some money, and we'll make sure your needs are met. As opposed to, no, I got a clarity of vision about the direction that we're going to go, and it's infused by careful thinking. Did you get that? Yeah.
So you said that, they said, the government or the doctors can just say, oh, you can't have a baby because we don't think it's going to work out. They can't do that in the United States. I mean, I know you said...
Not in the U.S. yet.
But in China, they do this to the girls a lot.
Yeah, China, there's forced abortions, right? So mandatory one child. And if you're only going to have one child, you're going to have a boy because a boy can make money, a girl can't. So the abortions in China of girls are off the chart. But it's not just places like China. It's Scandinavian countries where the power has now been taken out of the hands of parents or out of the hands of the sick person if they're an adult, and it's into the hands of the competent people, the experts. The people who sit there and go, I don't think this is a valuable life. Why? Well, they're probably never going to recover, which means they're not going to be a significant contributor to the economy. They really can't do much for us. Plus, it looks like they're in a lot of pain. Maybe they don't even look like they're in a lot of pain. It just doesn't, they're just not helpful for us. So we will make the decision against your will to end your life. And end with this. I would hope anyway, if you look at the either or, you should be able to just intellectually understand, I think it's a better culture to live in a culture where all human beings are treated with dignity and they're all accorded the right of the status of persons. Does anybody want to live in the other culture? Nope. Don't take this as like, don't argue with me. If you do, I'd love to hear why. Because here's the reality, guys. That's the culture we live in. We don't live in that one. We don't live in the culture where it says all human beings are persons. We live in the culture where it says only some are. Only some have made the grade. And we're going to continue to live that way until we get another Wilberforce. So the challenge to you is make it that way. and don't think you can't do it. Because that's what people were trying to tell him for years and years and years and years and years. And he persevered. And he changed history. And now we read about him and we admire him and we look at him and we go, I want to be a great man like that. So think about your heroes. Think about why they're your heroes. Think about what you're dreaming and is it big enough? And then ask God, Lord, whatever you want to do with me, do something great. Because I don't want to be mediocre. I want to be great. You got a question or a comment? Did you have a comment? Yeah. Are you just stretching? Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I know that, and I forget which country it was, but they eliminated, I think it was spina bifida, by aborting all children, Denmark, by aborting all children who were diagnosed with, I think it was spina bifida in women, or Down syndrome, I'm sorry. So what do we say to a country or a society that says, this is a really tough disability, whatever it might be, severely limits the individual in some ways. And so we're going to treat it as a negative and we're going to get rid of it and make sure that no one is born with this again by making sure that those genetics come to fruition through life. And I see a lot fewer kids in society today that have Down syndrome or spina bifida. I don't see as many as I did when I was a kid. And I suspect it's because we devalue children who are born with those diseases. How do you
So
comment on that?
the irony is the man who discovers the Down syndrome cause is a guy named Jerome Lejeune, who's going to be a saint. So this man has a massive, he is driven by faith. He's a phenomenal physician. Used to be the head of the Vatican's Pontifical Academy of the Sciences. So he's a very devout Catholic, identifies how this is caused. People used what he discovered to eliminate human beings. He didn't discover it to eliminate it. He discovered it so as to care for people. So we could probably say a couple things, and these wouldn't be exhaustive. One of them would be the key question we always want to ask about, in this case, that child, say, discovered in the womb is, well, what is that? And what's the answer?
Person.
It's a human being. That much we can agree on. That's a human being. It's a sick human being, but it's a human being. We can't decide whether or not it's a person, because we're schizophrenic on that. So that's the first question is, what is that? That's a human being. Okay, so then all of a sudden you've just jumped to, so either we're going to say, okay, that's an acceptable human being and a life worth saving, or we're going to go no. And the reason for no is, well, I mean, what kind of life can it have? Which means I'm already looking at it saying, my decisions are the only ones that matter. If you can't do what I do, then I would look at you and go, well, gosh, what kind of life do you have? You're just a little person. So somehow I have this thought that if you can't do what I do or think what I think or look the way I look, you're just not as valuable as I am. What kind of arrogance is that? Just because, say that to a blind person. No, you can't see, man. Life must just, whatever. And they would say, yeah, it's a handicap, but I have gifts that you don't have because of the fact I can't see. So we want to be careful that we don't make ourselves the defining principle of all of reality. If you can't do what I do, then you just have no value. That's just insane. Yeah.
Is there any country in the world that all human beings are accepted?
Poland. There's a few others, but Poland's the only place I've ever been where abortion is illegal. There are other countries, but Poland's one of the few. Is anybody Maltese in here? I think abortion's still illegal in Malta too. There's other countries, but but I've never been to another country outside of Poland where it's illegal. And I can tell you this, and Mr. Stockwell's been there with me. You can tell. Like you can breathe it. I don't know how to describe that to you other than to say Poland's got a lot of issues. Trust me, it's not a perfect country. But you can tell, and I'm not Polish like one drop. You can tell as soon as you get there, something is very different here. And the thing that you begin to realize is they don't kill children here. And you've never breathed that air. And to be able to breathe that air is really like clean. Don't you think?
Yeah, one thing I noticed too is all the masses that we went through, everybody that attended the mass, they all wanted to be there. It was a total different, you'd see young people, old people coming in, but it wasn't, nobody was looking around, nobody was looking at their phones. Everybody really wanted to be in church and at mass. It's hard to explain.
And see, this is a country, I mean, maybe it's not surprising, right? This is a country which experienced on its soil, not very long ago, at the time when my mom and dad were alive, my dad fought in World War II, people treating them like they weren't human beings. And so one of the responses to that is, no. All human beings are persons. Starting here and going all the way to there, from the beginning to the end. You can't lose it. It's not granted to you. It's something that's inherent to you, which, oh, by the way, is what our founding documents as a country say. Right? All human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. They're endowed by their Creator, not by a government. Just like that sign says, God is greater than the government. Rights are not given to us by authority. If they are, that's power. That means somebody's deciding now, you can live, no, yes, no. Why? Just because I happen to feel that way today. So, someone has to do that. Why not you? Why not this class? Why not this culture? Why not this generation? Okay? This is all summed up in just one word. Think. I beg you. Father John has always been trying to do with you all year long is to get you to think. And I know because I hear it from some of your parents and I've heard it from some of you, the response to what he's been doing only shows we haven't been thinking. Like, if we were to do 8th grade math without ever having done math, you guys would be drowning. Some of you are drowning already, all right? Even haven't done all this, right? So, but imagine trying to do this. Imagine trying to do 8th grade math without, I don't know, simple addition. It would just be crushing, right? So you prepare all throughout the grades to get to here. All of a sudden, this is my sense. Father John walked in and said, we're going to do 8th grade religion. And in a certain sense, and I mean this really respectfully, I don't mean it in any way as an attack on any teacher. I just mean we're just not used to doing this. We're used to religion being like, I don't know, it's just kind of fluffy. It's just, there's nothing there. But if you don't think, and faith's trying to help you to think, faith's trying to tell you to think. If you don't think, when you get to these really meaty topics, what are you left with? You're left with who yells the loudest. Well, that's not how you win an argument. The way you win an argument is, I don't know, what's the truth? And then you just follow the truth. And in that kind of reasoning, truth never has to yell. I don't ever have to yell. We just have to talk. And let the argument be led by the truth. Yeah.
Actually, I think religion's gotten a lot harder from 6th grade to 7th grade with Father Johnson. He does it way differently.
And by design, and that's what we're trying to change, right? So it's and that's the challenge of Catholicism being a thinking faith. And we want you to ask, we want you to probe, and hopefully by him being with you as often as he's been all throughout the year, you realize, I think I can ask questions. And I think I have people I can go to. Because this is all we do, is to think about this. But the really important questions that are going to drive the country are these questions. If I get that wrong, I get everything else wrong. Who cares how much money you make? All right? Anything else?
Somebody have any questions? No? Any questions from you guys,
Yeah.
Claire?
What would be like the first big step to making that difference?
This. A group of you getting together, recognizing I'm not alone. I mean, look, this is a pretty sizable number of people. And there'd be a lot more who could join you. So getting together, believing it can happen is huge, right? If anybody does, whether it's sports or music or dance or something where you have to visualize you doing something, visualize this happening. Like, see it in your mind. Like, abortion is declared illegal. Wilberforce had to see that. Like, I have to believe there will be a time when there will be no slavery. So see it. And then talk amongst yourselves. Like, what can we do to change? A black friend of mine, not Father Prentice, another black friend of mine, said to me one time, if I'm not going to treat the person right in front of my face with dignity, then how am I going to treat the child that I can't see in the womb with dignity? What I mean by that is, you guys want to make a significant change, do everything you can from now until the end of this year amongst yourselves. You guys be like the people who are responsible for it. We will do two things. We will always strive to treat every person in this school with dignity, mindful that they're a person. And we won't tolerate people not doing it. That doesn't mean we're going to go beat them up, right? Not tolerate means when we see others treating people with a lack of charity, we're going to find a way kindly, charitably ourselves, but directly to say, hey, I couldn't, and not publicly where you're going to shame somebody. You kind of catch them after school or you catch them at lunch or whatever, you just say, and it's usually a couple of you together, because if you do it one-on-one, it's awkward sometimes. So maybe the two of you just go in and say, I just can't help but notice that we overheard you saying such and such about so-and-so. I don't think you should do that. Why? Well, how's it feel when you find out people have been talking about you? Treating you like a thing? Lousy. That's why. So the more that we can begin ourselves to treat people with kindness, with charity, with dignity, first of all, that would just be a beautiful school. And if I can't see that in the person in front of me, then trying to see it in the child that I can't even see in the mother's womb is going to be really difficult. There's other things too, I'm sure, but those would be some things. You guys are already way ahead of the game. It'd be a great question for you to talk amongst yourselves. How can we make this happen? Because the ideas are in this room. They're not in my head. They're in your heads. Because you're the ones who are going to change this. Anybody else? And next year, at least those of you who are going to be in high school, if you never have, watch a video of an abortion and see if you still think the same thing that you do now after you see it. I won't show it to you now, But I'll show it to you next year in high school. Because it's hard to argue with looking at what we're talking about. You can turn on the TV tonight, say after 9 o'clock, and you can see and hear everything, right? I mean, everything you can find on a television in your room, except one thing. You will never, ever see an abortion. Don't you think that's odd? Because once I see it, and I understand what we're talking about, now we're in a whole different territory. Someone has a, so you asked the question about the devil, huh? Remember what we learned about the devil? So the devil is envious of who? Us. So God, the evil one is not like the rebellious kid in class who's just kind of thumbing his nose at all the authority figures saying, hey, party at my house tonight. The devil is like the person who's standing outside the door knocking, hoping that you will invite him in so that he can kill you. That's the devil. He hates us. And he wants to do everything he can to destroy us. And so, behind the scenes, what moves cultures are spirits. And there's a spirit in our culture that has a vested interest in keeping us in darkness and not seeing what we're talking about. Because he knows if we were to see with our eyes what it means to rip a child apart, we would immediately be able to go, I don't think you should do that. Like, that's bad. I don't know what bad is, but that's bad. That's got to be harmful. That's got to be wrong. We would just know it. And so he just tries to keep things in shadows.
Father?
Yeah.
Someone in your family is really taking a stance on this as well. Your brother.
Yeah, my brother saved hundreds of lives. So my brother died a year ago, April 28th. And anybody ever go to the place where he worked? Because I know a bunch of kids in our parish. Did you go to Mother and Unborn Baby Care? Yeah, my brother would call me and he'd say, hey, we had another save today. I'm like, you had a what? He goes, we had a save today. I go, what's that mean? He goes, we helped a mom who was thinking of abortion, and we're going to support her and care for her and provide for her and whatever. It was never just about the child. It was always really intentional to be mother and unborn baby, right? Care for the mother, care for the child. Don't make a split between the two. And I asked him one time, I said, how many saves do you think you've had this year? He goes, I don't know, like 110. It's like, Pete, you have 110 kids who are alive because of you. Yeah, I know. It's extraordinary. Like, I don't have anybody who's alive because of me. My brother has hundreds of people who are alive because he knew how to think rightly about this. Did you ever show the clip on Sir Nicholas Winton?
We did that in Edge Night.
So show it here. Show this would be a great thing to show for this club. Okay. So Sir Nicholas Winton is this guy. He just died like a year and a half ago. So he's like 104. Englishman who went over to, I think, Czechoslovakia in 1938, and he realized something's not looking good for the Jewish people, and especially for the children. I'm going to do everything I can to rescue these children. So he created this fake organization in England to rescue children. So the guy's just creative as all get out, but he's driven by an understanding that that's a human being, we should save that. So he did everything he could to save all these kids. Never told a soul. I mean, made up fake birth certificates, fake baptismal certificates, anything he could to save people. So later in his life, he's like 75 years old, whatever. His wife one day finds this huge footlocker up in their attic with all these records in it, all these kids. She's like, what are these? He says, I did something in the war to help some people. Oh. So she gives it to the BBC, the broadcasting company in England. They go and investigate. They find all these people that are alive because of him. And then they invite him to this event. And he's sitting in an auditorium that's packed with people. And they start talking to some of the people in the auditorium. He has no idea why he's there. And at a certain point, somebody says, well, I'm alive. You know, I grew up in Yugoslavia. My parents died in the gas chambers. I was rescued. How were you rescued? A man in England saved my life, brought me here, smuggled me in. And then the MC says, is there anybody else here today who's alive because of Nicholas Winton? And everybody stands. And the MC says, Sir Nicholas, would you please turn around and see the people who are alive today because of you?
And they're older people now.
Oh, they're all in their 70s.
Yeah.
And they all have children and grandchildren. There's like 5,000 people who are alive because this guy saw a problem, recognized this is wrong, I'm going to do something about it. So why not you? And can you imagine getting into heaven and the Lord saying to you, Claire, would you like to see the people who are alive because of you? And what that would feel like. So go be great. Okay? All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time.